David Carter threw the divorce papers at his wife and called her worthless, a gold digger, a parasite feeding off his success. He had no idea his poor waitress wife was actually a billionaire heiress who had been secretly funding his entire empire for 6 years. This is the story of how Rachel took back everything. And I mean everything. Sign the papers, Rachel. Stop wasting my time. His face was twisted with contempt as he looked at his wife of 7 years, the woman he was about to throw away like yesterday's trash. Rachel Bennett Carter stood frozen, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the couch to steady herself. She was 30 years old, but felt ancient. The bruises on her soul ran deeper than any physical wound could ever reach. David, please. Can we talk about this? We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Fix what? David interrupted with a cruel laugh. You? There is nothing to fix because you were never worth fixing in the first place. You are broken goods, Rachel. I was stupid enough to marry you when you were just a nobody waitress, and I have wasted 7 years of my life dragging you along like dead weight. Rachel felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not anymore. She had cried enough over this man. She had cried in bathroom stalls while David entertained guests downstairs. She had cried in the shower where the water could hide the sound. She had cried into a pillow at 3 a.m. while David slept peacefully beside her, completely unaware or uncaring of her pain. David stepped closer, and Rachel instinctively took a step back. He had never hit her. He was too smart for that. But his words were weapons that cut deeper than fists ever could. Physical bruises healed. The wounds David inflicted lasted forever. Look at you. David sneered, his ice-blue eyes scanning her up and down like she was something disgusting he found on the bottom of his shoe. You are pathetic. No education, no skills, no ambition, no money. You contribute nothing to this marriage except embarrassment. My colleagues laugh at me behind my back because I married someone so far beneath me. Do you know what Richard Morrison said to me at the club last week? He asked me if I picked you up at a homeless shelter. That is how embarrassing you are to me. That is not true, Rachel said, though her voice cracked. I have been a good wife to you. I have supported you through everything. When you were building your company and working 20-hour days, who was there? When you almost lost the Henderson deal and had a breakdown, who held you together? I have taken care of this house, organized your events, managed your social calendar, and supported your career. Things a paid assistant could do for $50,000 a year, David shouted, his voice echoing off the marble walls of their enormous kitchen. Do you know how much you cost me? This house, this 12,000 square foot monument to my success. I pay for it. Your clothes, those sad little dresses you wear to my company events, I pay for them. Your food, your car, your phone, your worthless existence, I pay for all of it. You are a financial drain, Rachel. You are a parasite feeding off my success. The words hit her like physical blows. Rachel had heard variations of these insults for years now, but they never stopped hurting. Each one was a small cut, and over 7 years, she had been cut so many times, she felt like she was bleeding to death from 1,000 invisible wounds. I loved you, Rachel whispered, and even as she said it, she wondered if it was still true. Did she love him? Or did she love the memory of who he used to be? Or who she thought he was before she realized it had all been an act? You loved my money, David corrected coldly. Let us be honest, Rachel. You were a waitress making minimum wage, living in a cockroach-infested studio apartment in the worst part of Queens, working 3 jobs just to pay rent. Then I came along, rich, successful, handsome, and I offered you a way out. You saw a meal ticket, and you grabbed it with both hands. And now you have gotten 7 years of luxury out of me. That is more than someone like you deserves. That is not why I married you, Rachel said, her voice gaining a little strength. I married you because I thought you loved me. I thought you saw something valuable in me, beyond my appearance or what I could do for you. I thought you were different from other wealthy men I had met. David's eyes narrowed. What other wealthy men? You worked at a restaurant. You did not know any wealthy men before me. Rachel caught herself. She had almost revealed too much. David had no idea about her real background, about the Sinclair family, about the billions she had walked away from to live an anonymous life. And she needed to keep it that way for just a little longer. I mean the men who came into the restaurant, Rachel said quickly. The Wall Street types who thought every waitress was available for the right price. You seemed different. You seemed kind. David laughed bitterly. I was kind. I took pity on you. I elevated you from nothing to this. He gestured around the kitchen with its professional-grade appliances, marble countertops, and custom cabinetry. And how do you repay me? With suspicion, jealousy, and constant neediness. I cannot take it any more. You are the one who changed, Rachel said, and now there was anger creeping into her voice. When we first got married, you were attentive and caring. You called me during the day just to say you loved me. You came home for dinner. You asked about my day. You made me feel like I mattered. When did I stop mattering to you, David? Was it gradual, or was there a specific moment when you decided I was worthless? David was silent for a moment, and Rachel thought maybe, just maybe, she had gotten through to him. Maybe he would remember the man he used to be, or at least pretended to be. But then he smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Rachel had ever seen on another human being. You want to know when you stopped mattering? I will tell you. It was about 3 years ago when I realized I had outgrown you. I was closing $100 million deals, and you were at home reading novels and volunteering at the food bank like some kind of saint. I needed a partner who could match my ambition, my drive, my level. And you could not do that. You were stuck being small while I was becoming great. So you found someone else. Rachel finished his sentence, her voice flat. David smiled again, and this time there was genuine pleasure in his expression. Her name is Vanessa Montgomery. She is a corporate attorney, one of the best in New York. Beautiful, successful, educated, sophisticated, everything you are not. We met at a legal conference 18 months ago, and I have been seeing her for the past 8 months. She challenges me intellectually. She understands the business world. She can hold conversations with my associates without embarrassing me. She is my equal, Rachel. Something you could never be. 8 months. He had been cheating on her for 8 months. Rachel did the math quickly in her head. 8 months ago was last spring. That meant David had been with Vanessa during their anniversary dinner, during the company retreat in Miami, during the charity gala where Rachel had worn the blue dress David said made her look fat. All those times, he had been living a double life. "Does she know you are married?" Rachel asked. Of course she knows. David said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She knows I am in the process of ending a mistake I made 7 years ago. She is very understanding. Unlike you, she does not get emotional about everything. She is practical, rational, and professional. And she is moving into this house at the end of the month. Rachel repeated his earlier statement, letting it sink in. You are replacing me like I am a piece of furniture you got tired of looking at. Exactly. David seemed pleased that she was finally understanding. I need you out by Friday. That gives you 4 days to pack your things and find somewhere to go. The $100,000 I am offering you should be enough to get you started. Rent an apartment. Maybe take some community college classes. Get a job. Build a life for yourself. A life that does not revolve around me. Rachel bent down slowly and picked up the scattered divorce papers. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold them. She scanned the first page, seeing the legal language that would end their marriage. Dissolution of marriage. Irrevocable waiver of spousal support. Division of assets. None to petitioner. It was all there in black and white. David wanted to erase her from his life completely and leave her with almost nothing. What if I do not sign? Rachel asked quietly, though she already knew the answer. David's expression darkened. Then I destroy you in court. I have already spoken to my attorneys. We have a strategy. We will paint you as a gold digger who targeted me, married me for my money, and is now trying to steal everything I built with my own hands. We have witnesses who will testify that you were lazy and unmotivated, that you contributed nothing to the household, that you spent money recklessly. We have evidence that you have been distant and cold, probably because you were having an affair yourself. I have never been unfaithful, Rachel said immediately. Does not matter. David shrugged. We will create reasonable doubt. A bartender at a hotel in the city who will say he saw you there with another man. Credit card receipts that I will interpret as secret rendezvous. Text messages taken out of context. By the time my lawyers are done with you, your reputation will be destroyed, and you still will not get a penny more than I offer you, because the prenup we signed is airtight. Rachel had forgotten about the prenup. 7 years ago, 2 days before their wedding, David's lawyers had presented her with a prenuptial agreement. She had been so young, so in love, so trusting. She had signed it without even reading it carefully, believing that she and David would be together forever, that they would never need the protections outlined in those cold legal documents. The prenup says you get $100,000, David continued. That is it. No alimony, no share of assets, no ongoing support. One lump sum payment, and we go our separate ways. I suggest you take it, and be grateful. He leaned down until his face was inches from hers, and Rachel could smell the expensive cologne he wore, the same scent she used to find comforting, but now made her feel sick. You are nothing without me, Rachel, David said, his voice low and venomous. I made you. I took you from that pathetic life of poverty and gave you everything. This house, these clothes, this lifestyle, it is all because of me. And now I am taking it all back. You will go back to being nobody, and I will move forward with someone who actually deserves to be by my side. So sign the papers and take your 100,000, or refuse and get nothing. Your choice. But either way, you are out of my life by Friday. Rachel looked at the man she had loved for 7 years, the man she had believed in, supported, and stood beside through every challenge, the man she had reorganized her entire life around, the man who was now throwing her away like garbage because he had found a newer, shinier toy to play with. And something inside her shifted, something cold and hard that had been building for months, maybe years, finally crystallized into diamond-sharp clarity. She was done being a victim, done being small, done letting David Carter define her worth. Okay, Rachel said softly. I will sign. David blinked, clearly surprised by her sudden compliance. He had expected tears, begging, maybe even screaming. Really? Just like that? Just like that. Rachel set the papers carefully on the table. But I need 48 hours to find a lawyer to review these documents before I sign. That is my legal right under Connecticut law. Any contract of this magnitude requires adequate time for legal review. David waved his hand dismissively, already losing interest in the conversation, now that he thought he had won. Fine. 48 hours, but not a second longer. I want you out of this house by Friday. I am having the locks changed on Saturday. So if you are not gone by then, your belongings will be left on the lawn. Understood. Rachel picked up her purse, a simple leather bag that David had criticized for being cheap and embarrassing. She walked toward the kitchen door that led to the garage. "Where are you going?" David demanded, suddenly suspicious. Rachel turned back to look at him one last time, memorizing every detail of his face. The arrogant set of his jaw, the cold blue eyes that had once looked at her with what she thought was love. The expression of superiority that came from believing he was better than everyone else around him. "To get a lawyer," Rachel said calmly, "like you suggested. I want to make sure I understand exactly what I am signing before I agree to anything." David relaxed slightly. "Good. Be smart about this, Rachel. Do not try to fight me. You will lose. And it will cost you the little I am offering you. Take the money, disappear, and let us both move on with our lives." "I will keep that in mind," Rachel said, and walked out of the house. She got into her car, the 7-year-old Honda Civic that David had given her, because he said anything nicer would be wasted on someone like her. She had wanted something more reliable, maybe a newer model, but David had insisted that she did not need anything fancy, since she barely drove anywhere. Another way to keep her small, keep her dependent, keep her trapped. Rachel drove 3 blocks away from the house, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She pulled into the parking lot of a grocery store, put the car in park, and finally let herself fall apart. 7 years of abuse, manipulation, and systematic destruction of her self-worth poured out of her in great, gasping sobs. She cried for the girl she had been when she married David, full of hope and love and trust. She cried for all the times she had made herself smaller to accommodate his ego. She cried for the dreams she had abandoned, the friendships she had let wither, the life she could have had if she had never met David Carter. But after 10 minutes, the tears stopped. Rachel wiped her face, looked at herself in the rearview mirror, and made a decision. She was done crying over David Carter. She was done letting him make her feel worthless. It was time to remind herself of who she really was. Rachel pulled out her phone, not the iPhone that David had given her, and monitored constantly through shared family tracking apps. But the secret prepaid phone she had bought 2 years ago with cash skimmed carefully from the household grocery budget. $5 here, $10 there, saved over months until she had enough for a basic smartphone that David didn't know existed. She had bought the phone the first time David had threatened divorce, back when she realized she needed a way to communicate privately, to research her options, to prepare for the inevitable day when his cruelty would finally cross the line into complete abandonment. That day had finally arrived. Rachel dialed a number she had saved under a fake name, listed in her contacts as Dr. Peterson, in case David ever looked at her phone. But it was not a doctor. It was a lawyer. The lawyer she had been consulting with secretly for the past 18 months, building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for this exact moment. Law offices of Margaret Chen. A receptionist answered on the second ring. "I need to speak with Margaret Chen immediately," Rachel said, her voice steady despite the tears still drying on her face. "Tell her Rachel Bennett is ready to move forward with the plan." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Rachel could hear muffled voices, the sound of the receptionist covering the phone and speaking to someone else. Then, "Just one moment, please. She has been waiting for your call. I will put you through right now." Less than 30 seconds later, a crisp, authoritative voice came on the line. A voice that had become as familiar to Rachel over the past year and a half as David's voice, but in a completely different way. Where David's voice had become associated with criticism and cruelty, Margaret Chen's voice represented hope, strategy, and the promise of justice. "Rachel, are you safe?" Margaret asked immediately, her tone professional but concerned. "Yes, Margaret, I am safe." He finally asked for the divorce. Actually, he didn't ask. He demanded it. He threw the papers at me and told me to sign. And does he suspect anything? Does he have any idea what you have been planning? "None," Rachel said, and she felt a grim satisfaction in that fact. "He thinks I am exactly what he has always believed I am. A poor, uneducated, helpless woman with no resources and no options. He thinks I am going to sign his papers, take his insulting settlement offer, and disappear quietly from his life." "How much is he offering you?" Margaret asked. $100,000 for 7 years of marriage. For 7 years of emotional abuse and systematic destruction of my self-worth. $100,000, and I waive all rights to alimony or any share of marital assets. Margaret was quiet for a moment, and Rachel could practically hear her thinking, calculating, strategizing. Then she spoke, and there was a note of cold satisfaction in her voice that made Rachel feel hopeful for the first time in months. "Then let us show David Carter exactly what nothing looks like when it takes everything away from him. Are you ready to do this, Rachel? Once we start, there is no going back. This will be public, messy, and potentially very painful. But if you are ready, if you are absolutely certain, then we move forward with the full plan." "I am ready," Rachel said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. "I am done being his victim. I am done letting him define my worth. It is time to show him who I really am." "Good." Margaret's voice was all business now. "Come to my office immediately. We have 48 hours to execute a plan that I have been preparing for 18 months. And Rachel, by the time we are finished, David Carter is not going to know what hit him." Rachel wiped the last of her tears, started the car, and drove toward Manhattan. David thought he was divorcing a helpless, worthless woman with no resources and no options. He had no idea he had just declared war on someone who had been preparing for this battle for years. He had no idea his wife was not Rachel Bennett, the poor waitress from nowhere. She was Rachel Sinclair, heir to one of the largest fortunes in America, and she had been secretly funding his entire empire for 6 years. And now she was going to take it all back. Margaret Chen's law office was located on the 65th floor of a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan, with views that stretched from the Hudson River to the East River, encompassing the entire island. The office itself was all glass, steel, and intimidating success. Original artwork on the walls, leather furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars, the kind of space that announced without words that the person who worked here was very, very good at what they did. Rachel had been here many times over the past 18 months, always during the day when David was at work, always careful to pay for parking with cash so there would be no credit card trail, always using her secret phone to coordinate times when she could slip away without raising David's suspicions. Margaret Chen herself was in her early 50s, with silver-grey hair cut in a sharp, no-nonsense bob, dark eyes that seemed to catalogue and analyse everything they saw, and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. She had spent 15 years as a federal prosecutor, putting white-collar criminals in prison before going into private practice. Now she specialized in two things: high-stakes divorces involving substantial assets and taking down wealthy men who thought they were above the law. Rachel had found her through careful research, reading about her cases, her win record, her reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her clients. Margaret Chen did not lose, ever. And that was exactly what Rachel needed. When Rachel arrived at the office, Margaret was waiting in her private conference room with her assembled team. There were 3 other people present, all of whom Rachel had met before during previous strategy sessions. James Park was a forensic accountant, a thin man in his 40s with glasses and the kind of mind that could untangle the most complex financial schemes. He had worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division before going private, and he specialized in finding money that people tried to hide. Sarah Mitchell was a private investigator, a former detective with the New York Police Department, who now worked high-end cases. She was in her 30s, with red hair and a deceptively friendly face that made people underestimate her. Rachel had learned that was a mistake. Sarah was brilliant at surveillance, at gathering evidence, at building airtight cases. And Robert Vasquez was a specialist in white-collar crime, a lawyer who worked closely with federal authorities on cases involving securities fraud, insider trading, and money laundering. He was in his 50s, distinguished-looking, with connections to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI. This was Rachel's team, the team she had been working with secretly for 18 months, building a case against her husband that he had no idea existed. "Rachel, sit down." Margaret gestured to a chair at the head of the conference table. "Tell us exactly what happened today." Rachel sat and recounted the entire conversation with David. His cruelty, his contempt, his affair with Vanessa Montgomery, his demand for divorce, his insulting settlement offer. She told them everything, her voice steady now. The emotion drained away and replaced with cold determination. When she finished, Margaret looked at the others. "We move forward with the full plan. We have 48 hours before David expects Rachel to sign those divorce papers. In that 48 hours, we are going to file our own divorce paperwork, freeze his assets, alert federal authorities to his crimes, and take away everything he thinks he owns." "Are we ready?" James Park spoke first. "I have completed the forensic analysis of Carter Capital Management's financial records. Based on the documents Rachel has provided over the past 18 months, combined with what I have been able to access through various means, I can confirm that David Carter has been engaged in systematic securities fraud, insider trading, money laundering, and embezzlement for at least 6 years. The evidence is overwhelming." He opened a laptop and pulled up a series of spreadsheets and documents. David has been running what is essentially a Ponzi scheme with some of his investment funds. He takes money from new investors to pay returns to old investors, while skimming millions off the top for his personal use. He has been manipulating stock prices through coordinated trading schemes with several accomplices. He has been laundering money through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, and he has been bribing state officials to get favorable treatment on various deals. "How much money are we talking about?" Rachel asked. James looked at his notes. Based on my analysis, David has defrauded investors out of approximately $350 million over the past 6 years. His actual legitimate net worth is probably around $50 million. Everything else is built on fraud, lies, and stolen money. Rachel felt sick. She had suspected David was cutting corners, bending rules, maybe even breaking laws. But this was so much worse than she had imagined. He had not just been unethical. He had been running a criminal enterprise disguised as a legitimate business. Sarah Mitchell spoke next. I have documented David's affair with Vanessa Montgomery extensively. I have surveillance photos of them together at hotels, restaurants, and her apartment. I have credit card receipts showing David paying for expensive gifts, trips, and accommodations. I have text messages between them that make it very clear this is not just a professional relationship. And I have evidence that David has been transferring assets to Vanessa's name over the past 6 months, clearly in an attempt to hide money before divorcing Rachel. She slid a folder across the table. David has put approximately $50 million worth of real estate, stocks, and cash in Vanessa's name. A penthouse apartment in Manhattan worth $12 million. A beach house in the Hamptons worth $8 million. Investment accounts totaling another $30 million. All of it transferred to her in the past 6 months. All of it clearly fraudulent conveyance designed to hide assets from marital property division. Rachel shook her head in disgust. She had known David was cheating, but the extent of his planning, his deliberate steps to ensure Rachel would be left with nothing, was breathtaking in its cruelty. Robert Vasquez was next. I have been in contact with colleagues at the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI. Based on the evidence we have provided, they are ready to move forward with a criminal investigation. They will execute search warrants and asset freezes simultaneously with our filing of divorce paperwork. The goal is to hit David from all sides at once, give him no time to react or hide additional assets. Margaret Chen looked at Rachel. This is your decision, Rachel. Once we start this process, David's life, as he knows it, is over. He will be arrested, prosecuted, and almost certainly sent to prison. His company will be dismantled. His reputation will be destroyed. Everyone will know what he did. This is not just a divorce. This is scorched earth. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Rachel thought about 7 years of cruelty. 7 years of being told she was worthless. 7 years of watching David become more and more ruthless, more willing to hurt people to get what he wanted. She thought about all the investors he had defrauded, people who had trusted him with their retirement savings, their children's college funds, their life savings. She thought about how he was planning to throw her away with $100,000 and no remorse. Yes, Rachel said firmly. I am certain. He deserves to face consequences for what he has done. Not just to me, but to everyone he has hurt. Margaret nodded. Then we move forward. But there is one more thing we need to discuss. Your true identity. Rachel took a deep breath. This was the part she had been dreading. The part that would expose the secret she had kept hidden for 7 years. David has no idea who you really are, Margaret continued. He thinks you are Rachel Bennett, a poor waitress he married out of some misguided sense of charity. He has no idea you are Rachel Sinclair, that your adoptive parents founded Sinclair Global Industries, that you are the sole heir to a $4 billion fortune. We need to decide when and how to reveal that information. James Park spoke up. I have traced the anonymous investments that have been funding Carter Capital Management for the past 6 years. $250 million injected through various shell corporations and investment vehicles. All of it can be traced back to Sinclair family trusts. Rachel, you have been funding your husband's company this entire time without his knowledge. Rachel nodded. When David and I got married, I was 23 years old. My parents had just died in that plane crash, and I inherited everything. But I was overwhelmed. I did not know how to run $1 billion company. I did not know who to trust. Everyone around me suddenly seemed interested in my money, not in me as a person. So I did something unusual. I put everything into professional trust management and walked away. I wanted to live a normal life, meet someone who would love me for who I was, not for my bank account. And you thought David was that person, Margaret said gently. I did, Rachel admitted. He seemed different from other wealthy men I had met. He seemed genuine, hard-working, ambitious but not greedy. He did not know about my family or my money, and I wanted to keep it that way. I wanted to know if someone could love me just for being me. So I used my mother's maiden name, Bennett, and told him I was a waitress with no family and no money. But 3 years into the marriage, Rachel, James prompted. What changed? David's company was struggling, Rachel explained. He had made some bad investments, was over-leveraged, and he was about to lose everything. I watched him stress himself into the hospital with ulcers. I listened to him talk about bankruptcy and failure. And I made a decision. I could not tell him who I really was, without destroying what I thought we had. But I could help him anonymously. So I used my trust funds to create shell corporations and investment vehicles. I funneled money into his company through what looked like normal investor channels. He thought he was attracting capital based on his business plan and reputation. He had no idea it was my money saving him. And that means legally, Margaret said with satisfaction. Everything David thinks he built actually belongs to you. Carter Capital Management was built on your capital investment. Under Connecticut law, that makes it marital property. But more than that, it makes you the majority investor with controlling interest. David does not own his company, Rachel. You do. Rachel let that sink in. She owned David's company. She owned the empire he was so proud of, the business he had built his entire identity around, the success story he told everyone to prove how brilliant he was. None of it was his. It was hers. It had always been hers. So here is what we are going to do. Margaret laid out a timeline on the conference table. Tomorrow morning, first thing, we file divorce paperwork. Not the papers David gave you, but our own petition, filed in Connecticut Superior Court. We ask for full division of marital assets based on Connecticut community property laws. Simultaneously, Robert contacts his colleagues at the SEC and FBI. They execute search warrants on David's office and home. They freeze all bank accounts, seize computers and files, and arrest anyone involved in the fraud. We hit him hard and fast, give him no time to react or hide anything else. By tomorrow afternoon, Sarah continues her surveillance and documents David's reaction. We anticipate he will try to contact Vanessa, maybe try to move additional assets, possibly even try to flee. We document all of it. Within 48 hours, we have David Carter exactly where we want him, arrested, facing federal charges, with his assets frozen and his company exposed as a fraud. And then, in divorce court, we reveal your true identity and take back everything you gave him. Margaret looked at Rachel. He called you worthless. We are going to show him that you are worth more than he could ever imagine. We are going to take everything from him. The same way he planned to take everything from you. This is not just revenge, Rachel. This is justice. Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power, control, hope. For 7 years, David had held all the cards. He had the money, the lawyers, the connections, the power. She had been completely dependent on him, trapped in a life he controlled. But now the tables were turning. Now David was about to learn that the woman he threw away was never worthless at all. She was priceless, and he had just made the worst mistake of his life. "Let us do it," Rachel said. "Let us take him down." The team worked through the night, finalizing documents, coordinating with federal authorities, preparing for what they were calling Operation Reckoning. Rachel stayed in Manhattan, sleeping on the couch in Margaret's office, not wanting to go back to the house in Connecticut, where David was probably celebrating his freedom with Vanessa. At 8 o'clock the next morning, Margaret filed the divorce petition electronically with Connecticut Superior Court. At 8:15, Robert Vasquez made a series of phone calls to his contacts at the SEC and FBI. At 8:30, federal agents began moving into position around Carter Capital Management's headquarters in downtown Manhattan. At 9 o'clock, everything exploded at once. Rachel was still in Margaret's office when it happened. Sarah Mitchell had eyes on David through surveillance equipment, and she was streaming live video to a monitor in the conference room. Rachel watched as federal agents in windbreakers with FBI and SEC badges emblazoned on the back walked into Carter Capital Management's lobby. David was in his office on the 42nd floor, completely unaware of what was about to happen. He was on a conference call with investors in Tokyo, selling them on a new fund that, according to James Park's analysis, was just another vehicle for fraud. Then his assistant knocked on his door frantically. Even through the surveillance equipment, they could see David's annoyed expression as he muted his call and snapped at her. "What is it?" "I am in the middle of something important." "Sir, the FBI is here. They have a warrant." David's face went pale. "What?" He stood up from his desk, and that is when federal agents entered his office. There were 4 of them, all business, all professional. One of them held up a badge and a document. "Mr. Carter, I am Special Agent Wilson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize all computers, files, and financial records related to the operation of Carter Capital Management. We also have a warrant for your arrest." David's face cycled through several expressions: shock, confusion, anger, and finally fear. "My arrest? On what charges? Securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy." Agent Wilson said, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the agent read David his rights, other FBI personnel began systematically boxing up computers, files, and hard drives. David's employees stood frozen at their desks, watching their boss being handcuffed in his corner office. "This is insane!" David shouted. "I have not done anything wrong. I want to call my lawyer." "You will have that opportunity at the field office," Agent Wilson said calmly. "Right now, you need to come with us." They led David out of his office in handcuffs. Rachel watched on the monitor as he was paraded through his own company, past employees who had believed in him, past the lobby with its enormous portrait of David shaking hands with the mayor, past the receptionist who looked like she might faint. Margaret turned to Rachel. Part 1 complete. He is in custody. His assets are frozen. Search warrants are being executed at his home and at Vanessa Montgomery's apartment as we speak. Now we wait for him to make his move. David was allowed 1 phone call from the FBI field office. Sarah Mitchell had arranged for monitoring of the call, which was legal given the ongoing criminal investigation. They listened as David called his attorney, a man named Richard Preston, who had represented him on corporate matters for years. "Richard, this is David Carter. I need you at the FBI field office immediately. They have arrested me on fraud charges." There was a pause, and then Richard Preston's voice came through, sounding strained. "David, I cannot represent you on this. I received a subpoena this morning. They want records of all my work for you. I am a potential witness. You need to find someone else." "What? Who is going to defend me?" "I do not know, David, but it cannot be me. I am sorry." David hung up and tried calling another attorney, then another, then another. Word had spread fast in legal circles. No one wanted to touch this case. David Carter was toxic. Finally, desperate, David used his one call to phone someone he thought he could count on. He called Vanessa. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice was cold. "What do you want, David?" "Vanessa, thank God. I need your help. The FBI arrested me. They are saying I committed fraud. This is all a misunderstanding. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to transfer the money in those accounts we set up. Move it to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The access codes are in my home office, in the safe behind the bookcase. The combination is your birthday. Can you do that for me?" There was a long pause. Then Vanessa laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "David, do you think I am stupid? The FBI is at my apartment right now with a search warrant. They are seizing everything. The properties you put in my name, the bank accounts, the stocks, all of it. They know about the fraud, and they know I helped you. I am probably going to be arrested too." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was full of contempt. "And you know what? I should have known better. I knew you were married when we started this affair. I knew you were planning to throw your wife away like trash. I should have realized that a man who could be that cruel to someone who loved him for 7 years would eventually be just as cruel to me. We deserve each other, David. Enjoy prison." She hung up. David stood in the FBI field office, handcuffed, abandoned by his lawyers and his mistress, watching his entire life collapse in real time. And somewhere across the city, Rachel Sinclair watched it all unfold and felt absolutely no guilt. The arraignment was scheduled for the next morning. David was denied bail, deemed a flight risk given his offshore accounts and international connections. He spent the night in a federal holding cell, probably the first night in his life that he had not slept on 1,000-thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets. Meanwhile, Rachel's divorce petition was served on David while he was in custody. A process server walked into his holding cell and handed him a stack of papers. "David Carter, you are being served with divorce proceedings initiated by Rachel Sinclair Bennett Carter, plaintiff." David looked at the papers in confusion. Rachel Sinclair? Who the hell is Rachel Sinclair? He read through the petition, his confusion growing with every page. This petition claimed that the plaintiff, Rachel Sinclair, had brought substantial assets to the marriage, that she had funded Carter Capital Management with over $250 million of her own money, that she was the majority investor and therefore entitled to controlling interest in the company. "This is insane," David said to the empty holding cell. "Rachel does not have any money. She was a waitress. This is a mistake." But as he kept reading, he saw the evidence. Copies of wire transfers from Sinclair family trusts to shell corporations to Carter Capital Management. Documentation of investment agreements, signed with electronic signatures that David had never bothered to verify. A complete paper trail showing exactly where the money that had built his empire had come from. It had come from his wife. The wife he had called worthless. The wife he had told contributed nothing. The wife he was going to throw away with $100,000. His wife had been a secret billionaire the entire time, and he had been too arrogant and self-absorbed to notice. David screamed in frustration, a sound that echoed through the holding cells and made the guards come running. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, giving David time to find representation. He eventually found a lawyer willing to take his case, a desperate bottom feeder named Gary Thompson, who worked out of a strip mall in New Jersey and had a reputation for taking cases no one else wanted. On the morning of the hearing, Rachel walked into Connecticut Family Court, flanked by Margaret Chen and her entire legal team. She wore a navy blue suit that was elegant but not flashy, her hair pulled back in a professional style. She looked calm, confident, and completely in control. David was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He had lost weight in the 2 weeks since his arrest. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He looked like a ghost of the man who had stood in that kitchen 2 weeks ago and thrown divorce papers at his wife. The judge was Patricia Caldwell, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for being fair but tough. She reviewed the case files with an expression of growing disbelief. "This is quite an extraordinary situation," Judge Caldwell said. "Mr. Carter, you are currently being held without bail on federal charges while simultaneously going through divorce proceedings. Your assets have been frozen by federal order. Mrs. Carter is seeking full division of marital property and compensation for what she claims are her substantial contributions to the marriage. Mr. Thompson, does your client have a position?" Gary Thompson stood up. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge the complexity of this case, we maintain that Mrs. Carter is not entitled to any significant share of assets. The prenuptial agreement clearly states that each party leaves the marriage with what they brought to it. Mr. Carter built his business, and therefore it should remain his property. Except..." Margaret Chen stood up smoothly. "Mr. Carter did not build his business, his wife did, with her money, which makes it her business, not his. Your Honor." Margaret placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. "I would like to present evidence that fundamentally changes the entire narrative of this case." "Proceed," Judge Caldwell said. Margaret opened the folder and began laying out documents. "Mrs. Carter is not Rachel Bennett, a waitress with no resources. She is Rachel Sinclair, sole heir to Sinclair Global Industries, one of the largest technology and investment firms in the world, currently valued at approximately $4 billion. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. David's face went completely white. Even Gary Thompson looked stunned. Furthermore, Margaret continued, laying out more documents. Mrs. Sinclair Carter secretly funded her husband's business with over $250 million over a period of 6 years. Every major deal Mr. Carter closed, every property acquisition, every business expansion, all of it was funded by his wife's money. Money she provided anonymously, because she wanted him to feel successful on his own merits. She loved him and wanted him to succeed. Margaret's voice hardened. But instead of appreciating that love and support, Mr. Carter responded with systematic emotional abuse. He called her worthless, useless, a financial drain. He told her she contributed nothing to the marriage. He had an affair. And then he tried to divorce her and leave her with $100,000, less than 0.1% of what she had given him. Judge Caldwell was reading through the documents with an expression of disbelief. "Mr. Carter, Did you know your wife funded your business? No, David whispered. His voice was barely audible. I thought the capital came from legitimate investors. I had no idea it was her money. You had no idea because you never bothered to look closely, Margaret said sharply. You were too busy telling your wife she was worthless to question your own improbable success. You thought you were a self-made man, Mr. Carter. But the truth is, you were entirely made by your wife's generosity. And now that you have betrayed that generosity, she is taking back what was always hers. There is more, Your Honor. Margaret continued. When Mrs. Carter discovered that her husband was using her money to commit fraud, she faced an impossible choice. She could stay silent and become complicit in his crimes, or she could expose him and risk losing everything. She chose integrity. She gathered evidence over 18 months, contacted federal authorities, and ensured that Mr. Carter's victims would have a chance at justice and restitution. Judge Caldwell nodded slowly. And the criminal charges? Mr. Carter has been indicted on 47 counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Robert Vasquez stood up. I have been working with federal prosecutors on this case. The evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Carter will almost certainly be convicted and face decades in federal prison. The judge turned to David, her expression severe. Mr. Carter, your position is completely untenable. Your wife did not just contribute to this marriage. She funded your entire career, your entire identity, your entire life. And you responded to her generosity with cruelty, infidelity, and an attempt to leave her destitute. I find your conduct to be reprehensible. But, Your Honor, Gary Thompson stood up weakly. My client's assets are frozen by the federal government. There is nothing left to divide. Not entirely true, Margaret said. We have identified $50 million that Mr. Carter transferred to his girlfriend, Vanessa Montgomery, in an attempt to hide assets from federal seizure and from his wife. We are asking the court to void those fraudulent transfers and return the property to the marital estate for proper division. Over the next 2 hours, the full scope of David's desperation and cruelty became clear. He had transferred the Manhattan penthouse to Vanessa's name, the beach house in the Hamptons, investment accounts worth $30 million. He had taken jewelry, artwork, and luxury cars that were purchased with marital funds and given them to his mistress. All of it was fraudulent conveyance. All of it was done with the specific intent to hide assets from Rachel and ensure she would be left with nothing when he divorced her. Judge Caldwell was visibly angry. Mr. Carter, you haven't only committed federal crimes, you have also engaged in fraud against this court and against your wife. I am voiding all transfers to Miss Montgomery effective immediately, and I am ordering those assets returned to the marital estate. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am awarding Mrs. Carter 75% of all non-frozen marital assets as compensation for her contributions, for your fraudulent conduct, and for your systematic abuse of her trust and generosity. 75%? Gary Thompson stood up. Your Honor, that is unprecedented. So is secretly funding your husband's entire business with $250 million while he calls you worthless, Judge Caldwell snapped. Sit down, Mr. Thompson. The judge looked at her notes. Based on the evidence presented, Mrs. Carter will receive $500 million from the non-frozen assets, including the properties transferred to Miss Montgomery and various other accounts that Mr. Carter attempted to hide. The remainder of Mr. Carter's assets will be subject to federal seizure for restitution to the investors he defrauded. And what about me? David finally spoke up, his voice desperate. "What am I left with?" Judge Caldwell looked at him with cold contempt. "You are left with approximately $10 million, Mr. Carter, which is far more than you deserve given your conduct, and far more than you would have if I had the authority to award Mrs. Carter every penny you fraudulently obtained." The judge paused. "You called your wife worthless. You told her she contributed nothing. You planned to throw her away with $100,000 and replace her with someone you deemed more worthy of your success. But your success was never yours, Mr. Carter. It was always hers. She built you up, and now she is tearing you down. And I must say, it is one of the most poetic examples of justice I have seen in 30 years on this bench. Mrs. Carter." The judge turned to Rachel. "Would you like to make a statement before I finalize this judgment?" Rachel stood up slowly. She had been mostly silent throughout the hearing, letting Margaret and the legal team do the talking. But now it was her turn. She walked across the courtroom until she was standing directly in front of David. "For 7 years," Rachel said quietly, "you made me feel worthless. You told me I contributed nothing. You systematically destroyed my confidence, isolated me from everyone I knew, and made me believe I was lucky that you tolerated my existence." Tears were streaming down David's face now, but Rachel felt no satisfaction in seeing them. She just felt empty. Like she was closing a chapter of her life that should never have been opened in the first place. "I gave you everything, David," Rachel continued. "My love, my trust, my support, and yes, my money. Hundreds of millions of dollars. I gave it to you because I believed in you, because I wanted you to succeed, because I thought we were building something together, but you didn't want a partner. You wanted a servant. You wanted someone you could feel superior to. You needed to be better than someone, and you chose me because you thought I had no power to fight back." Rachel leaned slightly closer. "You were wrong about that. I always had power. I just chose not to use it because I loved you. But the moment you threw that love away, the moment you decided I was worthless and replaceable, you gave me permission to stop protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. You are going to prison, David. You are going to lose everything. Money, reputation, freedom, the woman you thought you would replace me with, all of it is gone. And it is gone because you could not recognize value when it was standing right in front of you for 7 years. I am sorry, David whispered. Rachel, I am so sorry. I did not know. I did not understand. I was an idiot. Please. Now you are sorry, Rachel said. Now, when it is too late. Now, when you have lost everything and facing decades in prison, now you understand what I was worth. But it does not matter anymore, David. Your apology means nothing. It changes nothing. It does not undo the damage. She straightened up. I hope you use your time in prison to become a better person. I hope you learn that wealth and success mean nothing if you use them to hurt people. I hope you learn that real strength is not about making other people feel small. It is about lifting them up. But I will never know if you learn those lessons, because I am never going to think about you again. You are going to spend the next 20 years in prison thinking about me, about what you lost, about what you could have had. But I am going to spend those same 20 years building an amazing life, helping people, using my resources to do good in the world. Rachel turned and walked back to her seat. She did not look back at David. She was done with him. Judge Caldwell banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Judgment entered for plaintiff. Mr. Carter, You are remanded to federal custody pending trial." David was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and Rachel walked out a free woman. The federal trial happened 3 months later. The evidence was overwhelming. The government had everything: wire transfers, emails, recorded phone calls, testimony from co-conspirators who had taken plea deals, forensic accounting that traced every fraudulent transaction. David Carter was convicted on all 47 counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, bribery. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. At sentencing, the judge made a statement that would be quoted in law textbooks for years to come. "Mr. Carter," the federal judge said, "you have been convicted of one of the most extensive and deliberate fraud schemes this court has ever seen. You defrauded hundreds of investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars. You destroyed lives, ruined retirements, devastated families. You did it not out of desperation, but out of greed. And you did it while maintaining a public persona as a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist. But perhaps most disturbing is what we learned about your personal conduct. You emotionally abused your wife for 7 years while she was secretly funding your entire criminal enterprise. You called her worthless while living off her money. You planned to abandon her with nothing while hiding millions in assets. This court has seen many fraudsters, Mr. Carter. But your particular brand of cruelty, both to your investors and to your wife, stands out. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 22 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. I am also ordering full restitution to all victims, which will likely take the rest of your life to satisfy." David showed no emotion. He just stood there, hollow-eyed, as the bailiff led him away to begin a sentence that would not end until he was almost 60 years old. Vanessa Montgomery was also convicted. She had helped David hide assets, had accepted property she knew was obtained through fraud, and had participated in money laundering. She received 5 years in federal prison. As for the investors David had defrauded, they received partial compensation from the liquidation of Carter Capital Management's assets. It was not enough. Many of them had lost their life savings. But it was something, and they had Rachel to thank for that. If she had not come forward with evidence, David might have continued the fraud for years, and the damage would have been even worse. 3 years after David went to prison, Rachel Sinclair stood in the boardroom of Sinclair Global Industries, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. She had fully resumed her role as chairman and chief executive officer of the company her parents had built, and she had transformed it. Under her leadership, Sinclair Global had launched new initiatives focused on ethical investing, sustainable technology, and philanthropic work. The company's value had grown from $4 billion to nearly $6 billion. But more importantly, it was doing good work in the world. Rachel had also founded the Worth Project, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping survivors of domestic abuse. The project provided legal assistance, financial support, safe housing, job training, counseling, and long-term mentorship. In 3 years, it had helped over 8,000 women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. The project was funded entirely by Rachel's personal fortune, and she was actively involved in every aspect of it. She personally met with women who came to the program. She attended graduations when they completed job training. She wrote recommendation letters. She offered mentorship. She made sure every woman who came through the program knew that she had worth, that she deserved better, that she could build an amazing life. On this particular day, Rachel had a meeting scheduled with a potential new client, a young woman named Lisa Martinez, who had reached out to the Worth Project through their website. Lisa's story was heartbreakingly familiar. An abusive husband who controlled every aspect of her life. Isolation from friends and family. No money, no job, no resources. The desperate belief that there was no way out. Rachel knew that story. She had lived that story. Lisa entered Rachel's office looking terrified. She was thin, nervous, clutching a folder against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. She reminded Rachel of herself 3 years ago. "Miss Sinclair," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "Thank you so much for seeing me. I know you are very busy. I contacted your foundation about my situation, and they said you might be able to help me. Please call me Rachel." Rachel gestured to the comfortable chairs near the window, with the view of Manhattan stretching out below them. "And sit down. Tell me what is happening." Lisa sat down, and the words came pouring out in a desperate rush. Her husband was emotionally abusive, controlling every dollar, monitoring her phone, isolating her from everyone she knew. She had no access to money, no car of her own, nowhere to go. She had tried to leave once, and he had found her, brought her back, and made her life even more restricted. "I feel so stupid," Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. "How did I let this happen? How did I become this person?" Rachel reached across and took Lisa's hand. "You are not stupid. You are a survivor. And what happened to you was not your fault. Abusers are very good at what they do. They are good at making you feel like you are the problem, like you deserve the treatment you are getting, like you could not survive without them." Lisa looked up, hope and disbelief warring in her eyes. "Can you really help me?" "Yes," Rachel said firmly. "We are going to help you. We are going to get you out safely. We are going to connect you with lawyers who will help you navigate the divorce. We are going to find you a secure place to live where he cannot find you. We are going to help you get job training and employment. And we are going to provide ongoing support for as long as you need it." "I do not have any money to pay you back," Lisa said. "You do not need to pay us back," Rachel smiled. "You pay us forward. You survive this. You build a life that makes you happy. You become the person you were always meant to be, before someone tried to convince you that you were worthless. And maybe, someday, when you are strong and happy, you help another woman who is where you are right now. That is how you pay us back." Lisa started crying harder, but these were different tears. Not tears of despair, but tears of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much," after Lisa left with a folder full of resources, contact information, and a detailed escape plan. Rachel stood at her window again. The sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and orange and purple. Her phone buzzed. A text from Margaret Chen. "By the way, I got a call from a journalist at Forbes. They want to do a feature story on you and the Worth Project. What should I tell them?" Rachel thought about it. For years she had lived in hiding, terrified of her wealth being discovered, wanting to be anonymous. But that woman did not exist anymore. She was not hiding anymore. She texted back, "Tell them yes. If my story can help other women realize they have worth and can escape abuse, then it is worth sharing." That evening, Rachel received another letter from David. It arrived at her office, forwarded from the prison mail system. This was not the first letter he had written her. Over the past 3 years, he had sent dozens of them. Letters full of apologies, regret, self-pity, and occasionally anger. Rachel had read some of them. Others she had thrown away without opening. She was not sure why she kept accepting them. Maybe because each one was proof that she had survived, that she had won, that she was thriving while he was trapped in a cage of his own making. This letter was different from the others. Rachel could tell by the way it was written, the handwriting, less frantic, more measured. Dear Rachel, I know you probably throw these letters away without reading them. I would not blame you if you did. But I am writing this one anyway, because I need to say something, not for your benefit, but for mine. I have spent 3 years in prison. 3 years with nothing to do but think about what I did, who I was, who I became. The Bureau of Prisons makes you take classes as part of rehabilitation, anger management, financial responsibility, ethics. I thought they were a waste of time at first. But one of the counselors made me keep a journal, made me write down every day what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what I was learning. I filled 17 notebooks, and somewhere around notebook 12, I finally understood what I did to you. Not just the legal fraud, not just the affair, not just the divorce. I understood the systematic destruction of another human being. I spent 7 years telling you that you were worthless, and I did it deliberately. I did it because making you feel small made me feel big. I did it because if you believed you were nothing, you would never leave me. I did it because I am, at my core, a deeply insecure man who needs to feel superior to someone. I am not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve forgiveness. I am writing this to tell you that you were right about everything. I was worthless. My money was fake. My success was fake. My confidence was fake. All of it was a mask for a scared little boy who never felt good enough. But you, Rachel, you were always real. You were always enough. You were always valuable. I just could not see it because I was too busy looking at my own reflection. I read about the Worth Project. One of the guards here, her sister went through your program. She told me how you personally helped her sister escape an abusive marriage, helped her get job training, helped her build a new life. The guard said her sister is thriving now, happy for the first time in years. That is who you are, Rachel. You take pain and turn it into purpose. You take suffering and turn it into service. You are everything I pretended to be, but never was. I have 18 more years in here. When I get out, I will be almost 60 years old. I will have no money, no reputation, no future. I will be exactly what I always feared being. Nothing. But maybe that is what I need to learn. That being nothing is not the worst thing in the world. That you can start from nothing and build something meaningful. That worth is not about what you have, but about who you are and how you treat people. You taught me that, Rachel. It took losing everything for the lesson to sink in. But I finally learned it. I hope you are happy. I mean that sincerely. You deserve every bit of happiness in the world. Thank you for being strong enough to survive me. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. Thank you for using your resources to help other women escape the hell I put you through. You are the best person I ever knew, and destroying you was the worst thing I ever did. I am sorry. I know it means nothing. But I am sorry. David Rachel read the letter 3 times. She felt no joy in his suffering, no satisfaction in his regret, just a profound sense of closure. David had finally understood. It had taken 3 years in prison, but he had finally seen what he had done. She carefully folded the letter and put it in a drawer with all the others. Then she sat down and wrote a response. It was the first time in 3 years she had written back to him. David, I received your letter. I have received all of your letters, though I have not responded until now. I want you to know that I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was poisoning me. Forgiveness is not about you. It is about me choosing to let go of the pain you caused and move forward with my life. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It does not mean what you did was acceptable. It does not mean I want any relationship with you, now or ever. It simply means I am choosing peace over bitterness. You hurt me deeply, David. You damaged my sense of self-worth in ways that took years to heal. But you did not destroy me. I survived. I thrived. I built something beautiful out of the ashes of our marriage. I hope you use your remaining time in prison to become a better person. I hope you learn the lessons you claim to be learning. I hope when you get out, you use whatever time you have left to do good in the world, to help people, instead of hurting them. But whether you do or not is not my concern anymore. My concern is the 8,000 women who have come through the Worth Project. My concern is building a company that does ethical business. My concern is making sure my story helps other women realize they can escape, they can survive, they can build amazing lives. You are a chapter in my story, David, a painful chapter. But you were never the whole story. You never defined me, and you never will. I wish you healing and growth, but from a distance. This is the last letter I will write to you. Goodbye, David. Rachel. She sealed the letter, addressed it to the Federal Correctional Institution where David was imprisoned, and put it in the outgoing mail. Then she closed that chapter of her life for good. 5 years after David went to prison, the Worth Project held its annual gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Over 1,000 people attended. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, philanthropists, and hundreds of women who had been through the program and wanted to show their support. Rachel stood at the podium to give the keynote address. She wore an emerald green gown that made her feel powerful and beautiful. Her hair was down, styled in soft waves. She looked like a woman who had conquered the world. Because in many ways, she had. 5 years ago, Rachel began, her voice carrying through the great hall. I stood in a kitchen and had divorce papers thrown at me by a man who told me I was worthless. He told me I had contributed nothing to our marriage. He told me I was a financial drain, a parasite, an embarrassment. He told me no one would ever want me, that I was lucky he had tolerated me for as long as he did. She paused, looking out at the audience, hundreds of faces looking back at her, faces of survivors who knew exactly what she was talking about. I believed him, Rachel continued. For 7 years I believed him. I let him convince me that I was nothing, that my worth was determined by his opinion of me. I made myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the tiny box he had built for me. I lost myself completely. But then something changed. Not all at once. Gradually, I started remembering who I was before I met him. I started researching my options. I started building a plan. And when he finally demanded a divorce, when he finally pushed me too far, I was ready. Rachel smiled. I took everything from him. His money, his company, his freedom, his future. And I am not ashamed of that. He had defrauded hundreds of people. He had destroyed lives. He deserved to face consequences, but taking everything from him was not what saved me. What saved me was remembering my own worth, remembering that I had value independent of his opinion, remembering that I was never worthless. I was just married to a man who needed me to believe I was worthless so he could feel powerful. The applause started then, building slowly until it filled the entire hall. Rachel waited for it to quiet down before continuing. "The Worth Project exists because I know I was lucky," Rachel said. "I had resources that most abuse survivors do not have. I had money, lawyers, connections, options. Most women in abusive relationships have none of those things. They are trapped by financial dependence, by isolation, by fear. They want to leave, but they do not know how. That is why this project matters. We provide the resources that level the playing field. We provide lawyers who work for free. We provide safe housing. We provide job training and employment assistance. We provide long-term support. We provide everything a woman needs to escape and build a new life. But most importantly, we provide something you cannot put a price on. We provide the message that you have worth, that you deserve better, that you can survive and thrive." Rachel looked directly at the section of the hall where the program graduates were sitting. "In the past 5 years, we have helped over 15,000 women escape abusive relationships. 15,000 women who were told they were worthless. 15,000 women who are now thriving, building careers, raising children in safe environments, finding new relationships built on respect and love. Every single one of those women is proof that the word worthless is a lie told by insecure people who need to tear others down to feel tall." The applause was deafening now. Rachel waited again for silence. "If you are in an abusive relationship," Rachel said, her voice strong and clear, "if someone is telling you that you are worthless, that you contribute nothing, that you could not survive without them, I want you to hear this. They are lying. You have worth. You always have. You always will. And there are people who will help you escape and build the life you deserve." She paused. "My ex-husband is serving 22 years in federal prison. He lost everything: money, reputation, freedom. And you know what? I do not think about him anymore. He is not part of my life. He is not part of my story. He is just a lesson I learned, a reminder of what happens when you confuse cruelty with strength, when you measure people by what they can do for you, instead of who they are. I spent 7 years being told I was worthless. I spent the next 5 years proving that was a lie. And I am going to spend the rest of my life helping other women prove it too." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Women were crying, hugging each other, cheering. This was not just a gala. It was a celebration of survival, of strength, of women who had been knocked down and gotten back up. After the speeches ended, Rachel mingled with the crowd. She hugged program graduates, thanked donors, and posed for photos. And then she saw someone she had not expected. Lisa Martinez, the young woman who had come to her office 3 years ago, terrified and desperate, with nowhere to go. Except Lisa did not look terrified anymore. She looked confident, happy, alive. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair styled professionally, and she had a man with her who looked at her with obvious respect and adoration. "Rachel," Lisa said, and her voice was strong now, not the whisper of fear it had been 3 years ago. "I wanted you to meet someone. This is my fiancé, Marcus. We met at the job training program the Worth Project set up for me." Marcus shook Rachel's hand. "Miss Sinclair, Lisa has told me everything you did for her, how you saved her life. I just wanted to say thank you." I cannot imagine my life without her." Rachel smiled. "I did not save her life. She saved her own life. I just gave her the tools." "You gave me so much more than tools," Lisa said, her eyes bright with tears. "You gave me hope. You showed me that I could survive. You taught me that I had worth. And now I have an amazing life. I have a career I love, a man who treats me like an equal, and a future that I am excited about. And I owe it all to you." "No," Rachel said gently. "You owe it to yourself. You did the hard work. You were brave enough to leave, strong enough to rebuild. I am just glad I could help." After Lisa and Marcus walked away, Rachel stood alone for a moment, looking out at the crowd. Hundreds of survivors, hundreds of women who had been told they were worthless and had proven that was a lie. This was her legacy. Not the billions of dollars she had inherited, not the company she ran, not the revenge she had taken on a man who deserved it. Her legacy was these women, these survivors, these warriors who had taken their pain and turned it into power. 10 years later, Rachel Sinclair stood in her office, reflecting on everything that had changed. The Worth Project had helped over 20,000 women. Sinclair Global had doubled in value. She had been featured on magazine covers, given speeches around the world, written a best-selling memoir, but more importantly, she was happy. Genuinely, authentically happy. She was married to James, a doctor who loved her for who she was. They had 2 children who were being raised to understand that worth was intrinsic, not earned, and she never thought about David Carter anymore. Because he was not part of her story. He was just a chapter she had survived, a lesson she had learned, a reminder of her own strength. 22 years after sentencing, David was released from prison. He was 57, with no money and a felony record. He got a job at a non-profit helping formerly incarcerated people, making $40,000 a year. He lived modestly, worked honestly, and slowly rebuilt himself into someone better. He never contacted Rachel again. But he followed the Worth Project from a distance, reading about the lives it changed, the movement it sparked. And sometimes, late at night, he thought about the woman he had thrown away, the woman he had called worthless, the woman who had turned out to be worth more than he could have imagined. Meanwhile, Rachel lived a life beyond anything she could have dreamed. She ran a billion-dollar company. She had helped tens of thousands of women. She was happily married with children, and she never thought about David anymore, because he was not part of her story. He was just a chapter she survived, a reminder that worth was something no one could take away. It was something you carried inside yourself, like a flame in the darkness. And once you truly understood your worth, nothing and no one could ever diminish it again. That was the lesson. That was the truth. You are not worthless. You never were. And anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is simply too broken to see the value right in front of them. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more powerful stories. What did you think of Rachel's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below.